Hi, and welcome to this edition of the CCDC Shorts. Our CCDC Shorts are brought to you by the Chamber Coalition of Dakota County, and that is the chambers of Apple Valley, Burnsville, Lakeville, Hastings, and River Heights. My name is Krista Jack, and I'm the president of the Lakeville Chamber of Commerce, and thank you for joining us. And I'm very excited. Today, we have got Whitney Harvey with us, and she is the Senior Director of Workforce Diversity and Inclusion for the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. Whitney, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Absolutely. And we've invited Whitney to talk today. The topic that we would like to talk about is DEI in the workplace. And we know that that is something that many of our businesses have asked about, have talked to us about. And they're just, Whitney, you and I have talked about this. They're not sure where to start. It can be overwhelming. And so the purpose of this CCDC short is just to give you a quick 5 minutes or so of some high level information from Whitney that hopefully can help you wherever you are in this process, kind of take that next step. So Whitney, are you ready to dive in?
I sure am.
Okay, wonderful. So Whitney, when we say DEI in the workplace, really there's a lot of things that can fall under that. So what do we mean by that?
Yeah, so I think my first piece of advice to businesses is to really identify what the opportunity is in this space and try to determine what diversity, equity, and inclusion mean to them as a business. So at the Minnesota Chamber, we have kind of a standard definition of diversity, which is just kind of any category or characteristic that is used to differentiate us. I think the most common diversity focus areas are on race, gender, things like that. I think at the Chamber, we have a pretty broad definition and really try to focus on broader, dimensions of diversity. So incorporating other underrepresented demographics like immigrants and refugees, formerly incarcerated individuals, people with disabilities, veterans and service members, even military spouses. So that's how we look at kind of diversity. From an equity perspective, I think it's really just taking into consideration, the individual needs of your employees in the workplace. So, what works best for me might not be what works best for you or what works best for my colleagues. So taking into consideration kind of the accommodations and those individual considerations would be kind of our view on equity in the workplace. And then inclusion is the building of that safe and comfortable, respectful environment where, people can show up authentically, that you're taking into consideration their differences and those differences are valued and respected. So it's really about kind of culture, workplace culture.
And we even talked, you and I even talked a little bit, that's even as one generation is aging out of the workforce and another's coming in, there's that piece too, right? That people are looking at of having all these different generations working together in the workplace. So
yeah, absolutely. I would say, it's really any difference that could impact how somebody shows up to work, right? Or how they show up in the world. Age is definitely one that can make that impact. So I agree completely.
Wonderful. So why, Whitney, is this important to employers? Why should they be kind of talking about this and thinking about it?
Yeah, well, I think there's, multiple reasons. We kind of look at it from this like three-pronged approach, right? There's a moral imperative. It's the right thing to do to build inclusive workplaces where people feel valued and respected. There's a business imperative. So there is, research around organizations who prioritize this work tend to be more innovative, have higher financial performance, have higher employee retention, higher employee engagement. So it is really what our workforce is looking for. And then the economic imperative, right? So taking into consideration that our demographics are changing here in Minnesota. We got a tight labor market, we've got a low unemployment rate. And so I think economically, it makes sense for businesses to kind of broaden their recruiting strategies and start looking at, talent pools that they may not have engaged in the past.
So in talking about that, who can help them? Because I think, and you and I have talked about this, I think any new program can get overwhelming for people, right? Especially we see that people are, with workforce reductions and other things and like you said, tight labor market, sometimes they're so overwhelmed as it is. So then they look at it and go, okay, I don't even know where to start. And so who are some people that they can kind of reach out to kind of help them, first of all, find what lane they should be working in, and then where to start?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's something that we can help with too. As a state chamber, I think we have a very high level and gentle approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So taking into consideration all the nuances or differences that can impact a business's DEI strategy, things like business size, industry, geography, the demographics of community that you're serving and that you're operating in, right? All of those can impact what's possible. So from a chamber perspective, I think our goal is really to help businesses who are interested in taking that leap or interested in making progress. We've got resources on our website. We've got a DEI resource center. We've got a playbook that is really intended to be that kind of step-by-step guide, simplified and broken down into, more realistic and attainable steps towards making progress in this goal. And then from there, I mean, there's no shortage of DEI information out there. I think, our job is to kind of sift through it and identify what makes the most sense for us as Minnesotans and as the business community. So our resource center is really tailored to that. But another, opportunity is making connections, right, to other businesses who are doing this work and doing it well, to community-based organizations that can help advance this work. And so we can help with all of those things as well.
Great. And it's you have a very robust information available, and really people have the advantage with you, right? You work with businesses of all size, you work in all areas of our state. So you really have kind of that perspective. You've seen a lot of things. So you really have a lot to bring to that, to say, hey, we've seen it done this way here or this way,
Yeah.
right? To give some of those real world examples.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the big thing is to help businesses understand that what works for company A isn't necessarily going to work for company B, right? So the intentionality is so important because there are so many initiatives like this that gain traction and then kind of fail or fall dead. And part of it is, we're just trying to check a box. So the intentionality is really important. So you have to take into consideration all of those things that I mentioned previously, and then also where you're at as an organization. If you've never had conversations like this before, you probably don't want to dive into the deep end, right? You have to be very intentional with how you're delivering information, how you're rolling out initiatives, ensuring that you have kind of a solid why or a mission, so you can use that as kind of your North Star and anchor back. As employees are maybe questioning or wondering, how does this impact me or my business? Having all of that ready, I think it is really important.
Okay, nope, that makes sense. So you touched on it a little bit already, but maybe recap too a little bit of how will a focus on DEI positively impact their business? Why should someone kind of say we need to spend a little time in this?
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of touched on it previously. I think there's, those three imperatives: the moral, the business, the economic imperative. I'll touch on just, the workforce shortage alone, I think is enough to kind of drive businesses to take a new and innovative approach and kind of look into candidate pools that they haven't historically. So just from a workforce perspective, I think, ensuring that we're engaging everyone who's on the economic sidelines and getting them into the workforce is really, what's going to be best for our state, what's going to be best for our economy.
Okay. Yep, exactly. So last question is, and again, it kind of goes back to the who can help them, but where. If they're sitting here and going, okay, I know I need to start somewhere, and I think you've done a great job of saying don't start kind of over your skis, right? Like make sure you start where you're at and do it little by little. Where would you recommend if they said, all right, I got to do something, I got to start somewhere? Where do you recommend that they start to get more information and kind of start? Obviously, the Minnesota Chamber, you have a lot of resources. If you
Yeah.
were them, where'd you start this?
Yeah, so I direct people to the DEI playbook, which is available to really everybody, not just, Minnesota Chamber members. And that has kind of that step-by-step guide, and it's all the work that needs to take place kind of from a foundational perspective before you actually launch any initiatives. So the things that often get left behind, defining your terminology, gathering key stakeholders and ensuring you have adequate representation from the entire organization. So things like that need to take place. The DEI playbook also has a checklist on the back, so you can kind of mark your progress as you go. I would encourage people to reach out to me if they have specific questions, and I'm happy to assist as well, or help kind of make connections broader than just me.
Thank you so much, Whitney. I think that's some great information. I think it helps those companies who are kind of on the fence, right? And just saying, I need to start in that playbook, I think sounds like the perfect opportunity for folks. And we can share that out, obviously, I'm guessing as well through our site. So if you're watching, and again, Whitney has said, you feel free to reach out to her. You certainly can reach out to your local chamber to have that connection made for you as well. But I think the takeaway is don't be afraid to start, right? Don't, there's opportunities out there to help you along the way. And so Whitney, thank you so much for joining us and giving them this information today.
Yeah, and I just want to leave with kind of a few final thoughts that I think
Yes.
are really important is one, our job is not to judge businesses or tell them where they need to be or the goals that they need to meet, but really to give them the resources and information to meet their own goals, right? And help identify that opportunity. I always tell people, get comfortable being uncomfortable because that's when the growth happens and that's when we learn the most about each other. And then last but not least, give yourself grace. I think there can be a lot of shame for those who maybe haven't started these initiatives yet, and that is completely fine, right? I would say it's never too late to start, and we will meet you where you're at.
That is a great way to end it. Thank you so much, Whitney. Thank you for joining us on this. And again, this has been a CCDC short, which is brought to you by the Chamber Coalition of Dakota County. And those are the chambers of Burnsville, Apple Valley, Hastings, Lakeville, and River Heights. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.